In the smoldering ruins of a shattered world, after the final firestorms of the global nuclear war of 2060 had faded, a new power emerged from the ashes, the United Colonies of Nations, known simply as the UCN. It was not born from ideals or democracy, but from desperation and necessity. It was forged by Earth's wealthiest corporations, in what remained of its major governments, bound together by profit, survival, and a vision of expansion beyond the dying planet. The war had been fueled by dwindling resources, and its aftermath left Earth scarred and starving. To prevent another collapse, the UCN launched an ambitious space colonization initiative, scattering humanity among the stars in search of fresh lifeblood, minerals, energy, food, and hope. While the UCN allowed other entities, private corporations and nation-states, to fund their own expeditions, all efforts were subject to the authority of the global owners. No flag could fly without their blessing. No colony could thrive without their approval. But the reach of the UCN stretched thin as new settlements sprang up across distant moons, asteroids, and planets. In its early years, the organization struggled to manage this sudden explosion of outposts and habitats. Chaos simmered beneath the surface. To maintain order, the UCN turned to harsh economic sanctions and overwhelming displays of military might. Dissent was crushed. Autonomy was denied. By 2113, the UCN had outgrown its patchwork systems and provisional defense measures. The UCN Defense Force was disbanded, swept away in favor of a more unified weapon, the United Colony Army. It became the only legal sanctioned military across Earth and her colonies, a single centralized force empowered to enforce order among the stars, no matter the cost. And so, from the ashes of war, a new empire was born, not one of nations, but of ownership. By 2116, the stream of humanity's expansion into the stars nearly faltered. 6 colony ships, each a marvel of engineering and hope, vanished without a trace, swallowed by the wrath of a massive solar flare. Thousands of lives were lost in an instant, and with them, billions in investment. The UCN, already stretched thin, reeled from this blow. The grand illusion of total control over the stars cracked under pressure, exposing a harsh truth. They could not afford to lose again. In desperation, the UCN made a controversial decision. For the first time, it opened the bidding for colonization rights to the entire star systems, something once held tightly within its own grasp. The Alpha Centauri system, a jewel of potential and the closest to Earth's reach, was sold to the highest bidder, and the bidder was a Helghan corporation, a titan of industry with a reputation for ruthless efficiency. Helghan seized the opportunity with both hands. While the UCN retained ultimate authority, Helghan was granted full colonial rights to terraform, settle, and extract in Alpha Centauri. It marked a turning point, a quiet privatization of the frontier, where corporations, not governments, would shape the future of humanity. As expansion pushed further still into Altair and beyond, the UCN faced a new dilemma: how to enforce Earth's will across light years of space without scaring its military to the brink of collapse. The answer came in the form of the Interplanetary Strategic Alliance. Born from the fear of rebellion and forged as a symbol of unity, the ISA was more than just a military coalition. It was a UCN-forged pan-colonial defense pact designed to standardize control across the stars. Every new colony, every new outpost will fall under its watchful eye. In theory, it was a protector. In practice, it was a leash. The UCN's grip tightened, even as its reach grew uncertain. And far from Earth, on the worlds it barely understood, discontent was already beginning to smolder. As the decades passed, Earth's grip on the colonies only tightened. What had once been sold as a shared destiny among the stars had cuddled into something far more oppressive. Taxation without representation, surveillance without trust, and a suffocating bureaucracy that governed worlds it had never set foot on. Eventually, resistance took root. A growing number of outer colonies, those furthest from Earth's influence but closest to its consequences, rose in quiet defiance. Tired of being treated as assets rather than civilizations, a coalition of these colonies severed ties with the UCN. In a bold and defiant act, they established the Independent Colonial Strategic Alliance, or ICSA, a rival power bloc with its own flag, its own ideals, and a singular mission: freedom from Earth's rule. The ICSA preached sovereignty, self-governance, and a mutual protection. It called itself a brotherhood of exiles, a sanctuary for those who dared to dream of true independence. But ideals alone could not match the machine that was the UCN. Despite its rhetoric and growing membership, the ICSA lacked the resources, infrastructure, and military might to pose a real threat. The UCN, with its powerful economy and the backing of the Interplanetary Strategic Alliance, continued to dominate the stars. Trade routes remained under Earth's control, communications were monitored, and any hints of rebellion were swiftly and silently neutralized. Though the ICSA endured, it was a flicker in the shadow of a giant, a symbol of dissent, yes, but not yet a force of reckoning. Not yet. By the latter half of the 22nd century, cracks had begun to form within the very structure the UCN had built. At the heart of the unrest was the Helghan administration. Granted unprecedented control over Alpha Centauri decades prior, Helghan had grown far beyond its original charter, and now held a near monopoly over interstellar travel and spaceborne trade, sectors the UCN had always considered sovereign domain. Cargo, personnel, and communication all moved through Helghan-controlled lanes. They set the tolls, they dictated the flow of resources, and worst of all, they were reaping enormous profits from the very colonial projects the UCN had paid to build. To the Earth-based elite, it was nothing short of betrayal. Infuriated by their own creation, the UCN responded with a force disguised as policy. Tariffs were imposed on all interstellar commerce, squeezing every vessel that had passed through UCN control space. Colonies, already burdened by harsh oversight, were now hit with new layers of taxation. These measures were framed as necessary maintenance for stability. But the truth was far more calculating. The revenue wasn't reinvested into infrastructure or relief. It was funneled into war. Using the surge in tax income, the UCN began a secretive but aggressive expansion of the United Colony Army. Older vessels were retrofitted with advanced targeting systems. Entire fleets of new warships were laid down in orbital shipyards, designed not to fight external threats, but to dominate their own. These ships were built to counter Helghan's growing influence, neutralize ISA assets if they stepped out of line, and remind every colony that Earth still held the hammer. It was a dangerous game, one where diplomacy was replaced by intimidation, and unity gave way to suspicion. In the shadows of Helghan's wealth and the UCN's paranoia, the stars were becoming a battlefield once more. Helghan had always played a dangerous game, profiting off the UCN's infrastructure while carving its own empire among the stars. But when Earth imposed new tariffs and regulations designed to rein in its influence, Helghan administration did not bend, it refused. Negotiations followed, at first polite, then strained, and finally hostile. For every demand Earth made, Helghan responded with defiance. To the administration, this was no longer about trade, it was about sovereignty. And when the final round of talks collapsed in 2200, Helghan made its move. They seceded. The UCN called it treason. Helghan called it liberation. But whatever the name, the result was the same. War. The first extrasolar war ignited like a flash fire across the Alpha Centauri system. The Helghan administration's fleets, bloated with private contractors and retrofitted corporate dreadnoughts, clashed with the disciplined might of the United Colonial Army and the ISA's Alpha Centauri division. It was brutal, swift, and one-sided. By 2201, the outcome was no longer in doubt. Helghan's defenses were shattered, its orbital platforms were reduced to drifting debris. Its administration's civil government was captured. Its officials arrested and marched before UCN tribunals. What had once been a corporate superpower was now a conquered remnant. In the war's aftermath, the UCN Senate wasted no time. ISA Alpha Centauri was granted full administrative authority over the Helghan homeworld of Vecta. To prevent a resurgence of corporate nationalism, loyal civilians from Earth relocated en masse to the colony. Families, workers, bureaucrats, people chosen for the allegiance to the UCN order. The native Helghan populace, once the ruling class, was pushed to the margins, their cities repurposed, their industries regulated, and their political voice silenced. This wasn't just reconstruction, it was a message. The UCN had won, and the stars would remember it. The right to regulate space, to tax and control ship lanes, was not up for debate, and any colony, corporation, or alliance who thought otherwise would share Helghan's fate. The UCN may have won the war, but it had not won the peace. In the wake of Helghan's defeat, Earth's punitive measures sowed seeds of bitterness that would not have easily been buried. The redistribution of power in Vecta, handed over to the ISA governance, and repopulated by the loyalist Earth-burned citizens, sparked unrest. Once proud, Helghan elites found themselves displaced, disenfranchised, and under constant surveillance. Their influence erased, their identities rewritten. Violence would soon follow. What began as protests escalated into riots. Skirmishes flared in industrial zones, outlying districts, pitting the Helghan corporate majority against the Earth-born minority, now installed as rulers. The ISA responded with curfews, checkpoints, and armed patrols. But the damage had been done. Vecta was no longer a colony, it was a powder keg. Faced with a spiraling crisis, millions of Helghan colonists made a fateful decision. They left. With what resources they could salvage, they fled to the nearby harsh and largely uninhabited world that had shared their name, planet Helghan. It was a place of brutal storms, toxic atmosphere, and unforgiving terrain. But to the exiled, it was more than refuge, it was rebirth. Under pressure and seeking to contain the unrest, the UCN made a rare concession. In a formal declaration, it recognized the newly resettled Helghan administration as a sovereign entity. Planet Helghan was declared their territory in perpetuity, a symbolic gesture meant to appease the displaced, even as the news tightened around them. But while sovereignty was granted on paper, freedom was not. ISA forces surrounded the planet with blockades. Trade was restricted, communications monitored, and diplomatic channels reduced to cold formality. Helghan had a nation, but it was a nation in chains, quarantined behind a curtain of suspicion, sanctioned until it proved itself to Earth's liking. What the UCN failed to grasp was that in trying to smother rebellion, it had forged resolve. The fires of Helghan had only just begun to burn.
My people, sons and daughters of Helghan, for many years we have been a broken nation, shunned, oppressed, and conquered by those we sought to escape. 10 years ago, I asked for time, and that time was granted by you. You, the strength in my arm, the holders of my dreams. Our forefathers embarked on the greatest exodus in the history of all mankind. An exodus for freedom. Helghan became that freedom. Our new world changed our bodies. At first, it weakened us, but in fact, we were growing stronger. In the time you have given me, I have rebuilt our nation. I have rebuilt our strength. And I have rebuilt our pride. Our enemies at home have been re-educated. We have given them new insights into our cause. On this day, we stand united once more. On this day, those driven to divide us will hear our voice. On this day, we shall act as one.
The Second Extrasolar War erupted with a sudden fury as the Helghan Empire, purged in exile and hardened by years of sanctioned isolation, struck back against its old oppressors. Vecta once again became the battlefield, its skies ablaze with orbital fire, its cities torn by invasion. Caught off guard by the ferocity of the Helghan offensive, the Interplanetary Strategic Alliance called for immediate aid. The UCA answered, dispatching reinforcements from Earth to support the embattled ICA forces. But what the UCA fleet encountered above Vecta was unlike anything they had faced before. The Helghast had been prepared. As the UCA ships approached, a massive orbital defense platform under Helghast control unleashed a devastating barrage. Entire cruisers were torn apart in seconds. What was meant to be a show of force became a massacre, with the fleet on the brink of annihilation. And then, salvation came from the most unlikely of places. Led by Jan Templar, a veteran ICA soldier, a small team of operatives executed a daring strike behind enemy lines. Their mission disabled the platform before the fleet was lost. And against the possible odds, the team succeeded. The orbital cannon fell silent, and with it, the Helghast grip on Vecta began to falter. The ISA, reinvigorated, rallied. With the UCA's support, they drove the Helghast back from every district, reclaiming control city by city. The war's tide turned, and by its end, Vecta was once more in the ISA's hands. With the crisis seemingly over, the UCA declared the system stabilized. Under the orders from the UCN Senate, they withdrew, reinstating the Helghan blockade. But with one strict caveat: no further offensive action. Earth's goal was containment, not escalation. But for the ISA, it wasn't enough. The scars left by the Helghast invasion ran too deep. The cost in lives and cities was too high. And so, against orders, against logic, and against every warning, the ISA launched a full-scale counter-invasion of planet Helghan. And it was a decision born of vengeance, not strategy. And it would lead to catastrophe.
My people, sons and daughters of Helghan, this much I vow. The history of these days will be written in blood. By crushing the armies of our enemy, by seizing the weapons they thought to turn against us, we were fighting for our very existence. But if there are those who would deny us peace, refuse us our rightful place in the universe, then we will unleash such terrible vengeance that generations yet unborn will cry out in anguish.
By May of 2360, the Helghast Empire no longer sought victory, it sought annihilation. After decades of bloodshed, betrayal, and escalating war, the Helghast leadership resolved that only one path remained: total eradication of their enemies. Earth, the heart of the UCN and symbol of all Helghan suffering, became the target of a genocidal campaign. The plan was simple in concept, horrific in execution: unleash irradiated, extrasolar weapons across the planet, eradicating all life and silencing the UCN forever.
6 months ago, our enemies murdered a great man, Skalavazari, our nation's father. Today, we remember the hope he gave us, the purpose he gave us, the vision he gave us. A vision in which the Helghast people reclaim their rightful place in this universe. Years from now, we will tell our children of this day, the day his vision became our reality.
The invasion fleet was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Dozens of Helghast warships armed with doomsday payloads. The mission was absolute. No diplomacy, no demands, just extinction. But as the Armada closed on Earth, the Helghast tore themselves apart. Years of ideological tension within the Empire finally exploded into civil war. Two powerful figures, Admiral Orlok, the military hardliner, and Jorhan Stahl, fanatical industrialist. Each believed they alone was a rightful heir to the Helghan's destiny. As the fleet began to fire, it fractured instead. Mutants erupted, orders were ignored, ships turned on one another in a frenzy of betrayal. Amid the chaos, a small but determined ISA strike force, outnumbered, outgunned, but not outmatched, seized the moment. Navigating the broken remnants of the Helghast fleet, they delivered a critical blow: the destruction of the fleet's central command structure and its weapon systems. The invasion was stopped, but at a terrible cost. In the battle's final moments, one of the Petrosite's warheads detonated in low orbit, resulting in a blast that devastated the upper atmosphere, poisoning the air and shattering ecosystems across the entire continents. Billions perished in what would come to be known as Tetracide. And though the Helghast fleet was gone and their plan had failed, their legacy endured in ash and silence. The UCN leadership was shattered, the ISA decimated, and the survivors left scattered across the void, forced to ask a single question: was there anything really left to fight for?